Welcome to Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach. I'm Lori Wallach, and today's podcast is a breaking news episode because, unless you're unconscious, you are highly aware that, there be tariffs. So President Trump announced on Monday that at midnight, i.e. when Tuesday was starting, tariffs of 25% would be imposed on Mexico and Canada. Plus, he raised tariffs against China to 20%. And he said, no exceptions. Well, that was true at least for Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, President Trump announced that he had talked to the big three U.S. automakers and he was going to take automobiles from Mexico out from under those tariffs. And then 2 hours later, he included auto parts as well. And then, Thursday, he decided everything that meets the rules of our trade agreement, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, the replacement from NAFTA, Trump's deal, anything that met those rules could come in and be duty-free still, and there wouldn't be any tariffs, which, means a lot of stuff, frankly. The only thing that would be getting his 25% tariffs to Mexico now are a certain percentage of automobiles made there. Well, that was the morning. By late afternoon, he'd actually decided he would give a waiver to everything that is compliant with the USMCA that comes from Canada, which is to say that, yes, we now have a Schrodinger's tariff situation. The tariffs on Mexico and Canada are dead and alive at the same time. And actually, joking aside, this matters. Tariffs can be really helpful when they stop unfair trade that could hurt producers, American workers, and when used properly, they can signal to investors that the U.S. is a good place to build factories to make things. Because what it basically says is we've decided not to be deluged with imports from countries that break all the rules. Like their imports and their imports. China, Vietnam, they're a set of countries that have a big honkin' trade surplus with the entire world. That's because they use what are called beggar thy neighbor policies. They subsidize their imports by a whole set of things that are very mercantilist. They bring down the currency value or jack up ours. They have massive subsidies. They repress unions and suppress wages and consumption in their own countries. And then they make a ton of stuff and they sell it everywhere. And for those countries, the only way you shut down that abuse is you put up big tariffs for that stuff. And then you have space for domestic demand, from domestic consumption, frankly, from imports from countries that are cheating that way. But to send the signal to investors, hey, we're shutting down that unfair stuff. You should invest here. We're going to have more of a market for demand for stuff made here. Tariffs have to be consistent. They have to send a signal to investors that they're going to get a return on their money. They're going to be around. They're going to be at the level that's predictable to know it's worth investing. And instead of getting the effect of investors pulling out their checkbooks right now, instead they're reaching for their barf bags because this has become a total roller coaster. They have absolutely no predictability and there is not going to be investment and tariffs won't work like this. But before we get into that, let's start back on Monday. So this big set of tariff announcements actually wasn't ostensibly, officially about trade. No, they said it was about stopping fentanyl coming from Mexico, Canada, and China. Now, obviously, tariffs do not apply to smuggled stuff. Smuggled stuff is not coming through the customs to get signed up for its tariffs. So what is this really about? To stop fentanyl, President Trump has a really obvious play. That's ending the de minimis trade loophole. That's that crazy policy that facilitates a daily deluge of 4 million packages into the United States, mostly from China, that enter without paying any tariffs and are uninspected. Not shocking that hidden in 4 million uninspected packages are fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills from China and precursor chemicals to make fentanyl, and that stuff gets shipped nationwide. You want to stop fentanyl? You got to shut down that pipeline. Instead of doing that, which is totally within the administration's authority, they can literally issue an executive order shutting that down. Oh, and in fact, in February, they did. They started the first initial steps to shut down those scammy packages from China, Mexico, and Canada. And here's what's really grim. After meeting with the CEO of FedEx, a company that profits from delivering those de minimis shipments, Trump reversed course and reopened the de minimis loophole for packages from China. And then yesterday, he actually reinstated access for even more of the uninspected packages, cutting back in those coming from Mexico and Canada. Keep in mind, all of those packages dodge both tariffs and inspection. You want to deal with fentanyl and you want to actually effectively collect tariffs, de minimis has to go. Now, let's pivot back to tariffs and start with what would be a smart use of tariffs. As I start out saying, that's to bolster U.S. manufacturing capacity, to boost employment, to get U.S. workers making some of the stuff that we need, or to keep imports coming from other countries that aren't cheating. So you'd use the tariffs to stop unfair imports from countries like, China and Vietnam, the ones that are using what I call the beggar thy neighbor or mercantile policies. There's just one complication. Trump has put in new tariffs on China, and that's fine. That's one of the targets we should be tariffing. But his failure to close that de minimis loophole means that a lot of the imports that will come from China that he's targeting, and he should, not just with these 20% tariffs now, but the 20% tariffs he put on in 2018, all that stuff can use the de minimis loophole to evade the damn tariffs. So there is a practical problem here of even where he's tariffing the right stuff, and again, stuff from China needs tariffs, and we should add them to Vietnam. That would make sense. There's some other countries that are chronic cheaters, but the stuff is going to slip through from China because of no de minimis fix. And that gets us to Mexico and Canada. There's just no other way to say this. Trump needs to get over his obsession with Canada. We have balanced trade with Canada, ladies and gentlemen. If you take out crude oil, we have a trade balance. We have a surplus in industrial goods and manufactured goods. It is a bizarreness that we would be putting tariffs up against Canada and not, say, Vietnam, which has a huge honking trade deficit with us and is employing all of those classic mercantile abuses. And then, with Mexico, we do have a large and growing bilateral trade deficit. It's a real problem. It's in automobiles, it's in aerospace, it's in steel. That's a real deal. Well, before you just smack them with tariffs, you try and change the rules. You renegotiate that USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0. And conveniently, that is coming up for a mandatory 6-year review. So the 6-year review is supposed to be done July 2026. So instead, you basically say, all right, we're using tariffs, we're doing balanced trade, but we're going to try and actually fix this trade agreement with you, Mexico, so we can try and figure out what's going on that gets the deficit down. And there are a bunch of very specific things we can talk about at a future podcast about how you would do that, but it's doable. Now, if that fails, if Mexico says, no, we're not interested in that, or you do that and still it's a huge deficit, then you can think about tariffs. But you don't start there. So what does that mean practically for all of us? Because you keep hearing from the mainstream media and from a lot of talking heads, oh my goodness, prices are going to go through the ceiling. Well, here's the thing to understand. Tariffs are charged on the wholesale price. If a tariff is passed on to the consumer, there are two choices made. One, a company like a Walmart is deciding to buy the imported thing instead of something made in the US. So first is the choice to buy the imported thing and to buy it from a country that's known for trade cheating, so they've got a tariff. The second thing is they buy it at a wholesale price. They decide if they're going to pass through the additional price. When the first round of tariffs happened, when Trump was president, almost all of the cost was absorbed by the retailers. They just took down their profits a little bit. They still had record profits. They have record low taxes. They got plenty of space to not add the pennies on the dollar that a tariff might actually add that doesn't have to pass on to you. So if prices are being increased in the name of tariffs, just be aware that is corporate price gouging, some greedy company deciding you're going to pay for the dime on their $100 good is, as compared to them taking out their ginormous profits. Hope that's all helpful. More to come. It's going to be a roller coaster. Stay tuned.